Hey, I'm Clint Wright. I'm a stroke neurologist at NINDS and I do clinical research. And I'm here with Dana. Hi, Dana.
Hi, Clint. My name is Dana Freeman, and I'm a postdoctoral neuroscientist at NINDS.
Hey, that's great. So tell me, how did you get interested in the brain?
Yeah, I got interested in the brain at an early age, having struggled with mental health disorders. And then I was really fascinated by the way that the brain could change how my entire body felt. And as I got older and started studying science more, I was really excited by studying a system that we really didn't know that much about. And we had so many questions left to answer. And I really wanted to be that early generation of scientists using these new tools to put the puzzle pieces together.
Very, very cool. So tell me something really interesting about the brain that you've learned.
Yeah, an area of neuroscience that I am interested in studying is the diversity of causes and outcomes. So, for example, in autism, you can have siblings that both have autism that have different causes of that autism. And even when we study identical twins, we find that there can be different factors leading to autism, and they can actually have different severity of disease.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nina, and I'm a brain scientist and a brain doctor at NINDS at the NIH.
Hi, I'm Prashant. I'm a neurosurgeon and a brain scientist at the NINDS as well.
So, Prashant, tell me, how did you get interested in the brain? What made you excited about working on the brain?
Believe it or not, Nina, it's two words, Reader's Digest. So my dad inherited a Reader's Digest subscription from his dad. And as a part of the subscription, we got this book called as ABCs of Human Mind. And I remember I was just coming on to high school and was such a fascinating book. And I just kept that passion on as I went to medical school. I just realized that this is the thing that I really want to do, is to help people with problems in the brain and spine. And here I am at the NINDS doing surgeries and doing science.
Wow, that is so cool that everything just started with a book. That's
Yeah.
amazing. So what's a fun fact that you know about the brain that you'd like to tell everybody?
So I think the brain and the spinal cord are so important. And the way we know that is by seeing how much energy is utilized by the brain and spinal cord. It's over 20 to 30% of what we eat. So that tells us we should eat and drink well if you want to think well.
That is so incredibly cool. Thanks so much, Prashant.
You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Joseph, and I'm a postbac at the NINDS, which means I just graduated college and I'm doing some research before I go to medical school.
Hi, I'm Vicky. I'm a program director at NINDS.
So Vicky, how did you become interested in the brain?
So I became interested in the brain early on because my best friend growing up had intellectual disability. And I was always curious about how and why her brain worked so differently from my brain. And then later on, my nephew was diagnosed with epilepsy, which means he started having seizures when he was 3 months old, and then was diagnosed with a rare genetic disorder. And that really galvanized my interest in studying the brain.
Do you have any fun facts for us about the brain?
I think one of the coolest things about the brain and how different brains are is if you compare the human brain to rodents like mice and rats, their brains are completely smooth. They're very much smaller, but also very smooth on the surface, where our brains have lots of hills and valleys that allows for a lot more space for a lot more neurons so that we can have the abilities that we have as humans. And that's what makes our brains the human brain.
Wow, that's really cool.
Hi, my name is Justin Kwan. I'm a brain doctor with NINDS.
Hi, I'm Adam Hartman. I'm also a brain doctor at NINDS.
So Adam, what made you interested in studying the brain?
When I was in college, I was really fascinated with how the brain works. I was fascinated with how it seemed that the brain really was responsible for controlling a whole variety of different processes that go on within the body. Fascinated with how parts of the brain were connected to other parts and other parts of the body as well. And it seemed like there would always be something new to learn about the brain, neurochemistry, neuroanatomy, and how it interacted with other disciplines like psychology.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So can you tell us one fun fact about the brain?
So one fun fact about the brain is that people with severe epilepsy sometimes need an operation where one side of the brain is disconnected from the other, and they actually do really well after they've had that kind of surgery. And I've had the chance to work with some of those patients. It's really fascinating.
That is pretty cool.
Hi, I'm Prashant, and I'm a neurosurgeon and a neuroscientist at the NINDS.
Hi, I'm Nina, and I'm also a neuroscientist, and I'm a brain doctor as well at NINDS at the NIH.
Nina, that's great to hear. How did you get interested in the brain?
Oh, Prashant, it's such an interesting story. I mean, I think I always thought that what I wanted to do with my life was to work on something where I could generate answers to questions that nobody else even thought to ask. And the brain to me seemed like such an incredibly mysterious organ. Nobody knew how it did what it did. Nobody knew how it made us into the people that we ultimately became. I just thought it was a way to solve mysteries, to work on the brain. That was the most exciting thing for me.
Talk about exciting mysteries. Now, can you tell us a fun fact or a cool fact about brain that you think is something that people would love to know?
Oh, I think the coolest thing about the brain is that even though it's the brain that tells us when something hurts, when we feel pain somewhere else, you can touch and pull and prod the brain all you want, and the brain itself doesn't feel pain. Why would that be? That's the funniest design I have ever heard of.
That is really amazing. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sarah Waller, and I'm a scientific project manager at NINDS.
And I'm Kurt Fishbeck, and I'm a brain doctor, a neurologist at an intramural NINDS.
It's really nice to meet you, Kurt. Can you tell me how you first got interested in the brain?
Oh, it was back when I was a senior in high school, and the dad of one of my classmates, who's a neurosurgeon, came and gave a presentation about what he does. And what he did was come up with a new surgical treatment for Parkinson's disease, which is a disease that causes progressive loss of movement, tremor, and really loss of function in older patients. And his treatment was a nice approach to treatment of that disease.
That sounds really interesting. Do you have any other fun brain facts you'd like to share?
Boy, well, what we've found out since then is that if you can pin down the causes of these diseases of the brain, the neurologic diseases, if you find the cause and work out the mechanism, then you can really develop a lot of treatments that target the underlying cause that have a great impact on patients with the disease that really help with the problems, like diseases like Lou Gehrig's disease or spinal muscular atrophy, where correcting the defect can take patients who would have become paralyzed and died from the disease and give them a normal life.
Hello, my name is Jacob Short, and I'm a lab manager here at NINDS.
Hello, my name is Carolyn Shear, and I'm a neuropsychologist at NINDS. So Jacob, I'm curious, how did you become interested in the brain?
I've always been interested. Even as a kid, I was always fascinated by characters who could read minds. I thought it was so cool that you could read minds and hear what someone's thinking. But as I got older, I realized it doesn't really work like that. You can't just hear words. You might have an inner monologue, but it's not quite like that. Like if I have an idea and I can't express the idea, then how is a mind reader going to be able to read it in words? So I've always been fascinated by that.
Very interesting. And what is your favorite thing that you've learned about the brain, or a brain fun fact?
So in the lab that I work in now, we work with basically the way that a fruit fly, a little buzzing fly, sees. And, if you look in the mirror and turn the light off, your pupil gets really big. And if you turn the light on, the pupil gets really small because there's too much light. It's got to take in less light to work with that little bit. And we've realized that happens with the connections in the brain too. If a fly sees light all day for 24 hours, then the connection between the eye and the brain gets really small.
Hello, my name is Mark. I'm a neurologist, and I've been working at NINDS for a long time now.
Hi, Mark. I'm Prasanna, and I'm a postdoctoral researcher at NINDS. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well, Prasanna. I wonder if you could tell me how you first got interested in the brain.
Sure. So my interest towards the brain started very late. Unfortunately, when I lost a close friend of mine to brain hemorrhage, which is like bleeding in the brain. And this interest got deepened as I started knowing more about different disorders like epilepsy, multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's, etc., which are all linking back to the brain. So while learning about neuroscience, it's amazing to see that there are many aspects that are in line with the ancient yogic sciences and meditational aspects that orient towards holistic well-being.
Well, I'm very sorry to hear about your friend, but it's also good that that got you interested in studying the brain to see if you could advance the science and help people further. As you have been studying about the brain, you must have learned some things that you think are interesting, fun facts. Why don't you tell us one of those?
Sure. So being an electrical engineer, learning about myelin was the most interesting fact to me early on, because it is a substance that surrounds the nerve cell axons like insulation to the nervous system wires, increasing the rate at which the electrical signals are transmitted across different parts of the brain. So that was very interesting to me. And the loss of myelin sheath is actually is what leads to neuroimmune diseases like multiple sclerosis.
Aha, that's very interesting to know. The brain has many different parts and many different components, and it's important to study each one so that we really understand what's going on.
Yes, totally agree. And it's so fun to know that how everything is interconnected.
Hi, I'm Rebecca. I'm a health program specialist and I work at the NINDS.
And I'm Alex Tuttle. I'm also a program analyst at the NINDS.
So Alex, how did you get into neuroscience?
I was really interested in the brain because my mom was a clinical psychologist. So growing up, I would see her help people in therapy and hear about her successes. And I was curious at how the brain interacted with the human mind. Like, how did it lead to human psychology? So that's how I got into studying the brain.
And what would you say is your favorite fact about the brain?
My favorite fact about the brain, studying perception, is that most information that you see or hear or feel is actually processed on the opposite side of the brain. So for example, if you feel something on your left leg, it's the right side of your brain that's processing that information. And if you see something in your left visual field, that's also processed on the right side of your brain. So that's a really cool fact.
Yeah, I agree. That's really cool. Thanks, Alex.
Hi, my name is Adam Hartman, and I'm one of the brain doctors at NINDS.
Hi, my name is Justin. I'm also a brain doctor with NINDS.
So Justin, tell me, what got you interested in the brain?
Sure, Adam. So I became interested in the brain when I was a first-year medical student. In our medical school, we had a really interesting and neat museum where they carved out all the different pathways in the brain. And I thought that was just so fascinating that learning about how different portions of the brain control different parts of our body and how we did things. And that really led me to do what I do right now, which is I study how our brain controls different movements in our body.
That's great. Can you tell me a fun fact about the brain?
Oh, absolutely. I found out years ago that the brain actually doesn't feel any pain. And I thought that was pretty cool, that when you touch the brain doesn't say ouch.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alex Tuttle, and I'm a program analyst at the NINDS.
Hi, and I'm Rebecca. I'm also a program analyst at the NINDS.
So Rebecca, how did you become interested in studying the brain?
For me, it started pretty young. When I was 8 years old, my sister had a stroke, which is when there's a blood clot to your brain, and so blood can't get to your brain, and it can cause damage. And she fully recovered, but she developed chronic post-stroke pain in the form of headaches. And then years later, when I was a teenager, I developed chronic migraines, and I was fascinated by how we have these two different experiences, and we experience almost the same type of pain. And so I was really interested if there was some relationship there. And so I decided to study neuroscience.
Wow. So what's your favorite fact about the brain?
I think it's fascinating how fast and how long your brain grows. So in your first year of life, your brain triples in size in just 1 year. As an adult, your brain is about 3 pounds. So it's like if you put your 2 hands together, that's about the size of your brain. And your brain continues to develop into your 20s and isn't fully developed until you're in your early 20s, which is just amazing.
Cool.
Hi, I'm Prasanna. I'm working as a postdoctoral researcher at NINDS.
And I'm Mark. I'm a neurologist. I've been working at NIH for a long time now. And it's very nice to meet you, Prasanna.
It's nice to meet you too. So Dr. Hallett, how did you get interested in the brain?
That's a fun situation. I've been interested in the brain almost all my life. I first got interested when I was in high school. In my senior year in high school, I had a terrific class in psychology, and we learned all about the brain and various interesting psychological things. I've been fascinated by the brain ever since.
Wow, that's really nice to know. So what's your most favorite thing about the brain?
One of my favorite things about the brain is the way that the brain creates reality for us. One of the things that I didn't realize until relatively recently, actually, is that we actually live in the past, that what we believe to be the current now actually happened a short time ago. And when you think about it, it's really obvious, because when you see something, it takes a while for that information to get into the brain and to be processed. And so after it's processed, you think it's happening right then, but actually it happened a little while ago. So we really live a little bit in the past, and that is actually responsible for some interesting types of visual and types of situations where we have illusions about what's actually going on. It's because we really live in the past.
That's really interesting. Thank you for sharing.
I'm very happy to share these interesting information with you.
Hi, I'm Kurt Fishbeck, and I'm a brain doctor at NINDS at the NIH.
And I'm Sarah Waller. I'm a scientific project manager at NINDS.
Sounds good. Sarah, how did you first become interested in the brain?
I actually didn't first become interested in the brain and became interested in the spinal cord. When I was in high school, I was able to do research in a lab looking at the development of motor function, spinal learning, and just what the functions of the spinal cord are, which is what first exposed me to neuroscience and got me really interested in that as a discipline.
And what would you say is your favorite thing that you've learned about the brain?
I think the things that are the most interesting are the ones that can teach us more about the brain. So the really unique cases of people, for example, who can remember every detail of their life, or the woman who was in the news recently because she can smell Parkinson's disease. Then there are the odd cases of people who think that they're dead or can't recognize faces or objects. And all of those can just teach us so much more about the brain itself.
Yeah, I agree. That's really cool stuff. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Dana Freeman, and I'm a postdoctoral researcher at NINDS, and I'm here with Dr. Clint Wright. How are you doing, Clint?
Hey, yeah, hi, thanks, Dana. I'm Clint Wright. I'm a vascular stroke neurologist and do clinical research, and it's really nice to be here.
Great. So, Clint, how did you get interested in neuroscience?
Well, I started out interested in psychology and like trying to understand human behavior. And then I realized that a lot of it comes down to the biological processes that are going on in the brain and in the body. And I was fascinated by trying to understand really those mechanisms.
Awesome. So what's a really interesting thing that you've learned about the brain?
Well, I think one thing that's really, really interesting is we're starting to understand the concept of free will. And really, it's helping us understand how the brain works. Like with free will, you think that you make a decision to do something, and then you do that thing. But what we're starting to learn about the brain is that there are these sort of automatic mechanisms where sometimes you actually carry out the action, and then you try to understand the action. And that's telling us a lot about how the brain works.
Wow, that is really interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vicky, and I'm a program director at NINDS.
Hi, I'm Joseph. I'm a postbac at NINDS as well, which means I just graduated college and I'm doing a short fellowship before I go to medical school, hopefully.
So Joseph, how did you get interested in studying the brain?
So I became interested in the brain because my younger brother, has a diagnosis of Tourette syndrome, which means he has motor and vocal tics. For instance, he coughs and he can move his head uncontrollably sometimes. And I got really interested in why these kind of uncontrollable movements started in your brain and why he couldn't control them.
And what's a fun brain fact?
So my favorite brain fact that I've learned is that your brain and your nervous system actually come from the same cells as your skin and your hair and your nails and your fingers. Meaning that when you're still in 8 cells in your mother, when you're before even being born, they come from the same cells.
That's very cool.